Welcome back to What's the Verdict, a series where we explore the answer to the age-old question, good or bad. Today I'll be talking about Wonder Woman 1984. Now, this would normally just be a regular review, but considering that the film has already become such a huge controversy in terms of dividing fans, it seems appropriate to review it in this series. Wonder Woman 1984 is a wonderful representation of a wild, bombastic 1980s world, and the film itself feels very much like a 1980s movie. It's got a crazy story, it gets very cheesy at times, and it's all sorts of fun. In this film, we see both our protagonist, Diana, and one of our antagonists, Barbara, in a point in their lives where they are clearly alone, and have been for quite some time. But when the opportunity arises to change all of that through the form of the Dreamstone, a version of the dreaded monkey's paw, well, let's just say that's where the fun begins. The movie is filled with bright and colourful 80s nostalgia, and you can tell that the cast is having a ball with it. For example, take Donald Trump, I mean Maxwell Lord, played by the Pedro Pascal. The guy is having the time of his life chewing the scenery, and I was having the time of my life watching him do so. Also, can I just say, for those of you out there complaining about the acting, shut the sorry man, did I lost my cool, didn't I? Yeah, okay, I'll, try and just tone it down a little this time, okay? So, for those of you out there complaining about the acting in this film, just stop it, alright? The acting was great, and I'm sure most of you couldn't do any better. And just because the actor is visibly having fun with the role, doesn't mean it's bad acting, okay? One of the things I love most about this movie is the relationship between Barbara and Diana. The fact that they are, in a way, exactly like each other, but obviously in other ways they are also incredibly different. We get a sense from the very first moment we see Diana out of costume in her apartment that she's alone. All of the people she loved, all of her friends, they're all long gone. But I suppose that's the price of living a longer life than everyone else. And it seems like she's trying to keep life that way as she largely hides herself from society, and, though very politely, pushes other people away. Like, she doesn't want to go for drinks with Barbara at first, but eventually they do, and we see the bond start to form. We see that they need each other. Also, it's worth noting that a lot of people criticised the fact that the character trope of the loser who's shunned by society, who gets superpowers and becomes a huge douchebag who beats people up, is overused, but I wouldn't really say so. I mean, it's been used on like 3 other villains that I can think of, and how many superhero movies are we at this point? At least that's all I can think of. Electro, Catwoman, Aldrich Killian. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? My point is that it's hardly being used in every other movie. You see, I don't liken Barbara to Electro, Aldrich Killian, or even Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. I liken her to what's one of, and what many people argue is the best villain in any comic book movie ever. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. Now, I'm by no means saying that this is the best villain in any movie ever, but I'm just saying that the fact that Barbara is still a good person, but the power that is now a part of her takes away her humanity, her empathy, her goodness. But we still get the sense that the good person is still within her, that she feels remorse even if it's only slightly and momentarily, and she still stays lonely because it's that power that now isolates her from the rest of the world. This is very much the way that Sam Raimi treated Doc Ock. And what's so beautiful about this movie is not all the big bombastic 80s cheesefair superhero stuff, but it's the personal moments. Personal moments we get to see between Diana and Steve, personal moments between Barbara and Diana, and most notably, the moments we see of Maxwell Lord's human side. His compassion is the reason he's the villain of the story. The fact that he came from nothing and has strived his whole life to achieve this idea of the American dream, to own everything, to be more than he was, to be the person that he always wanted to be, and almost bury who he used to be. That's what's so amazing about this movie. I mean, the fact that by the end of the film, what turns the villain around is the notion that his selfishness, his greed, caused his son to be in danger. That's brilliant. I mean, yeah, it's no endgame final battle, and it's hardly revolutionary, but it's exactly what this movie needs. I think a large reason that this movie suffered so much and got so much criticism is because it's exactly what people wanted. Think about this, for example. Take Star Wars The Last Jedi, though not one of my favourite Star Wars films. In fact, it's one of my least favourite, even though I don't hate it as much as most people do, but that's a whole different topic for another video. I'm getting ahead of myself. Star Wars The Last Jedi was completely different, and that's exactly what people asked for. In fact, it was the complete opposite of the very thing that people criticised The Force Awakens for being too samey, too safe. And although a lot of people love that movie, they gave it a lot of stick for it. And then along came Rian Johnson, and he did something different. He did something that none of us expected, and although it didn't work out exactly as he or anyone else had hoped, people still hated it. And people hated it because although it wasn't exactly executed the right way, it was exactly what they asked for. Wonder Woman 1984 is the most comic booky live-action adaptation of a comic book I have ever seen in my life. And I've seen some pretty wacky stuff. I mean, comic books are dumb. You know, I'm just gonna say it. Comic books are very dumb sometimes. And this thing had a fucking wishing rock. And Pedro Pascal, he then became the Rock? And then... No, not that. No, not that kind of rock, but... Listen, basically it was weird, and I loved it. And that's comic books for you. Like, I'm sure if the MCU made every live-action adaptation of a comic book a one-to-one recreation, most people would hate it, because comic books do weird things, and they're not always the most sensible, but that is why we love them. Because they're so weird and wacky, and they give us hope in the darkest times. And Wonder Woman 1984 was the perfect film to close off a year like 2020. A year so difficult for so many people. This movie was exactly what people wanted. They just didn't realise it. Now, of course, this film isn't by any means perfect. Like any movie, it has flaws, such as feeling a little flat and long-winded at times, and some of the CG was a little dodgy. And no, I'm not referring to Cheetah, I actually like the way that turned out. I mean, it's a cat lady. What do you expect? To be honest, I wasn't too impressed with some of the cinematography and shot choices. Not always, but mainly in the second scene where Diana takes down some dudes in a mall. I understand that the scene starts off trying to obscure her with clever shots and editing, but I just found it a little disjointing and jarring at times. Also, one last thing, although I liked how Maxwell Lord was defeated, I kinda take issue with the fact that he was standing in the middle of this power beam of light or whatever, and it's so loud and overpowering that he feels the need to shout. But then you have Diana sat in the corner of the room talking him down at a fairly quiet volume. Like, how the fuck can he hear her? And don't tell me it's some lasso of truth bullshit, alright? Anyway, rant over, just had to get that off my chest. Another problem with the film is, once again, not a problem with the film itself, but a problem with the way it was seen and distributed. I think the problem is that most people, not all granted, but most, saw it on the small screen, as opposed to seeing it on the big cinema screen, and getting the full cinematic experience. And I think that no matter whether you agree or not, or whether you notice it or not, this does play a huge part in whether you enjoy a film initially or not. Take this for an example. When I first saw Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker in the cinema at midnight, it was a wonderful experience. And for a day or two afterwards, before I really started to think about the film, I thought it was the best Star Wars film ever. Yeah, I know, don't judge me. Now, of course, I look back on it as a huge disappointment, but initially, because of that cinematic experience, I enjoyed the film oh so much more. You see, if you're sitting at home, you tend to feel more relaxed with your thoughts. And you tend to stew in said thoughts and start to analyse things that you wouldn't usually in a cinema. So, what's the verdict? Listen, Wonder Woman 1984 is a beautiful and fun, action-packed movie, and the perfect film to cap off 2020. And it definitely doesn't deserve the hate it gets, nor does it deserve the 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. But to truly answer the question of what's the verdict, I'm going to use a line from the film performed beautifully by Pedro Pascal.
Life is good, but it can be better.
Now, of course, bear in mind that these are just my opinions and some things that I've taken from the film. If you like or dislike the film, make sure to leave a comment down below to tell me what you think and we could get a discussion going. And, of course, although I study film, I am by no means a film expert or scholar, so if I say some things that may sound pretentious in this video, don't take it too seriously. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, then maybe consider subscribing to catch our other content as and when it releases.